Hello, my dear friends. Today we will look at an astonishing diary of a German gun commander. I found his opinion about Kharkov city, bad supply of German troops, and food prices in the Soviet Union especially interesting. Also, he describes the heavy fighting for the brick factory. Altogether, this is a very uncommon view of the war in the snows of the Soviet Union. So now, let's get started. January 30th, 1943. By 9 a.m., about 20 men were back to their vehicles. Along with the captives of war, the inhabitants of the surrounding villages were mobilized. January 31st. Nora and I went for a walk around the city this morning. The center of Kharkov isn't that bad. Partly it has contemporary, beautiful buildings, and especially the cinemas and theaters, which are constructed in the American style and could successfully be found somewhere in our country. In the hairdresser's shop, we get our haircuts and a shave for 1 mark. Since June 1941, it was the first time I went there. The staff was consisting of women and was impeccable. There was even shaving cream and cologne. My little blonde woman did a great job shaving. Then we took a walk around, visiting the stores. We paid 9 marks for 6 toffees and 6 sweets. Moreover, that rascal asked for more, but we turned him down. 90 rubles for that? The toffees had the taste of soap. Only the sweets were good. These poor Russian people. There are a lot of beggars. It's no problem at all for Russians to beg for favors. February 2nd, 1943. Kharkov was apparently a beautiful city before the destruction. In a small cafe, we had a cup of cocoa and paid 1.5 marks. It was garbage. At least I wouldn't drink it at home. In another shop, which are very sparse here, there are some furs, clothes, musical instruments, porcelain, etc. The prices are insane. A fur hat worth 15 marks is priced at 1,180 rubles. That's 118 marks. And all these were pre-war prices. February 3rd. The awful fire supposed to have taken place in Kharkov when the Bolsheviks set fire to the main buildings of the city. All the main buildings in the center were ruined. I went to the shops again and wondered at the prices. A slice of cake, which costs us about 10 pfennigs, here costs 2 marks. A small bar of chocolate, same price, costs 5 marks, and a bar worth half a mark costs 24 marks here. This morning we moved to the eastern outskirts of Kharkov, where I discovered a lot of large and modern buildings. The city views aren't bad either. We headed for our maintenance company, which was housed in a huge steel plant that built tanks, steam locomotives, etc., and had 40,000 workers. This plant wasn't the newest of its type. The Russians removed most of the semi-finished and finished products along with the vehicles, but they left large quantities of raw materials. Today we visited the theater and saw the Nutcracker, Tchaikovsky's ballet. While the orchestra was good, the performance was a bit poor. All the performers and musicians are locals. The people are crazy around here. A woman fell off the blown-up bridge. When we returned from the theater, she was still lying there in the bitter cold. Nobody paid any attention to her. She was already half dead. The same thing I witnessed yesterday. A man was lying there as if he was asleep. February 6th. Our complaint worked. From now on, we get 1 loaf of bread for each person daily. That's twice as much as we used to get. I sent my mother a bar of soap and 2 bars of soap to Finn. Today, I saw a police detachment of soldiers. Those guys looked good. They were equipped with German carbines and they are appointed mainly for police service and control of forced labor. They are Ukrainians and they wear armbands with white, blue, and yellow stripes. February 8th. We are again short of sugar. The famine in the city is worse than we thought. The Bolsheviks have burned and ruined everything. If our forces had entered the city 2 days earlier, there would be a lot of things left unharmed. In fact, during the last 2 days, the Bolsheviks did nothing but destroy everything of value, including provisions. The dead people have been lying in many buildings for more than 2 weeks, and nobody takes them out. February 12th. Our sappers rebuilt the city bridges. February 14th. 3 Hungarian soldiers arrived at our unit today. The devil only knows how they got here. They were here for a few hours, then they went to the front assembly point. They don't speak German. February 16th. In the town of Marifa, not so much has been destroyed. There is even a glass factory still functioning. February 18th. The Romanian units took the brick factory, but were beaten out of it by the Russians early in the morning. At about 800 meters from it, we put our guns into firing position, but we had not fired yet because the attack was scheduled at 8:30 a.m. Before attacking, 18 dive bombers showed up and bombarded the Russians. Now the infantry is advancing, but the Russians lie hidden behind thick walls. Our troops are advancing with no cover. The first casualties appear, killed and wounded. There is nothing for us to do here, as we would threaten our men with shells. But to the right, in the open field, a whole Russian battalion advances. We fire on it and force the Russians to fall back. By this time, our soldiers approached the brick factory, but it was no success to knock out the Russians. The Russians hold their fortifications and shoot like insane. Their tank is accurate firing and humming. Our dive bombers appear again, but their bombs fall way too far to the left. We also make a few shots, but soon cease firing. That would be too dangerous for our soldiers. As noon approaches, we eat frozen canned food and bread, drink meltwater. At 3 p.m., we put our gun on a sledge while the new echelon of dive bombers attacks the Russians. We approach the factory. The bullets buzz disgustingly around us, but that doesn't stop us. We successfully shell the building in which the Russians are located. Anti-tank guns are also here with us and are firing direct fire, but they have casualties too. It is only us, thank God, who come out safe. Now our second gun and ammo for the infantry is approaching. We and the first gun withdraw. The second gun remains. It is a very cold night. There are 3 windows in our quarters, but all are without glass. We eat a bit more and have some cognac, which keeps us well warm. The night is relatively quiet, but in the morning the Russians fire with heavy shells. We can't even turn up our faces. Until evening we are to stay here and then replace the other gun. It's 10:30 a.m. now. I hope I can write something in my diary again tomorrow. The wounded are being brought in again. February 20th. My bad guesses came true. At 10:30 a.m., I made my last entries. A few hours later we all suffered an evil fate. It was just that we had made ourselves a good tea when by accident I looked through the window and spotted infantrymen running. More and more of them. And now I could hear tanks, tanks! I never thought I would see our infantrymen running like that. Truly, we had no guns against them, as they were 52-ton tanks, newly built, against which our light anti-tank guns were useless. I order my crew to move to the gun and prepare ammunition. Nor and Faust don't object, but the young guys flee in panic. I can't stop them. I have to be number 1 gunner by myself. I observe the terrain. For now, because of our men, we can't shoot yet. Our men appear, harassed by machine gun fire. Their tank also fires, but it can't be seen yet. Fortunately, some of our guys are here too. I see Felder, Vergens, and non-commissioned officer Hoffman. Using my panoramic sight, I observe the terrain. There it is. A small, round turret appears over the hill. Fire! Shot! Too distant. This tank has taken its position exceptionally cleverly. It is almost impossible to hit it now. Now the rest of the men flee in panic. And as the infantry runs away, they run away too. Faust and Nor remain. The distance is 800 meters. Fire! And the next shell goes off. Undershot! Perhaps the undershot was only 25 meters. The next shell had to fly out of the barrel when the tank moved. A quick turn of the barrel, a little to the right. Bang! The tank comes up more and more. And here it is! A mighty giant! It's firing at us, but the shells are bursting too far away. Our next shell bursts in front of the tank's tracks. The tank turns around and disappears. None of our soldiers are here anymore. The Feldwebel commands us to leave the gun and fall back. The Russians fire as hard as they can. They shoot with rifles, mortars, machine guns from tanks, which they have 3 of them. We are stretched out very far, and so the shooting isn't very effective. But we have wounded. It is worse than when they have left their shelters behind them. To my right, Nor, Vergens, and Hoffman are running. Nor suddenly falls and shouts. We keep running. February 23rd. Our mission was only to observe the enemy. Using binoculars, I focused my attention on snipers and machine gunners who were shooting at the village all day and night. But with all intentions, neither I nor my comrades were able to spot anyone. So well are they camouflaged. At 10 a.m., our artillery launched an intense shelling of the brick factory. Our infantry of 60 men nearly knocked out the Russians, but at 4 p.m., they counterattacked, succeeding in forcing our assaulting detachment to withdraw. Our assault guns aren't able to do anything either, as their tanks have powerful guns that pierce their armor. Now they are trying to outflank us again. I see things in very gloomy colors. I wish winter would pass sooner. We would teach them to run from us again in such a case. February 24th. I've had the most disgusting rash on my left leg for 8 days now, with no way for it to heal. I've had this rash on my arm, on my leg, on my stomach, on some places that have healed, but nothing can be done about the left leg. There are some spots here that are 1.5 centimeters in diameter. March 13th, 1943. There's a lot of talking about the rotation again. It always makes me smile when I hear the serious manner with which soldiers pass these rumors to each other. I'm sure it is not going to happen. All signs are that we are going to be here for a long time, and there is no way to leave now. We'd return after a few weeks' rest and have to join a future offensive. If we are rotated later, there will be more chances not to join the first line, but who knows what our command thinks. They will do the right thing, I believe it. So when we have to march again, we'll do it. I really wish we could go home, but what we can't do, we can't do. Always one person is happier than another. March 15th. It's always interesting to watch us getting up in the morning. First we itch, then we all hold a shirt or sweater in our hand, using the other hand to squeeze the lice. March 24th. We got 3 guys from the replenishment. They are young boys, born in 1922. March 29th. From now on, we no longer belong to our old division, which is still near Belgorod. We, together with our regiment, belong to the Moonshine Division. April 1st, 1943. Last night the Russian artillery fired very hard, a real barrage. They sent shell after shell towards us, but there were a lot of unexploded shells. April 14th. The Russians fired not much, but there were cases of 4 unexploded shells out of 5 shots. April 18th. The Russians returned our fire, but there were very many unexploded shells. There were 5 unexploded shells out of 8 shots. April 19th. They fired early in the morning, but there were a large number of shells unexploded. We found 8 shells nearby, most of which were fired from mortars. April 23rd. I got 2 new recruits. They were born in 1922. April 30th. The Russians put up a loudspeaker opposite our positions last night, by means of which we were told the usual nonsense. May 6, 1943. Since yesterday, our gun has been attached to the regiment. We can wrap it up and go on leave, but if something happens to me during a Russian attack, I'd like to see what a replenishment would do in this situation. The gun would lose at least 50% of its effectiveness. May 10, 1943. Daily routine. 6:30 a.m., wake up. 8 a.m., line up. 8 to 9 a.m., training with the replenishment. 9:15 to 10 a.m., training with the gun, direct aiming at the target. 10:15 to 11 a.m., training with the gun, indirect aiming at the target. The rest of the soldiers from 8 a.m. to 11:30 a.m., labor work. 15 to 15:30 p.m., cleaning of guns. 15:45 to 16:30 p.m., cleaning rifles. The Russians shoot intensely. A reconnaissance scout appears each morning. Here the diary ends. In the course of the regular battles for Kharkov, these entries were captured along with the Wehrmacht military post office. Most probably he sent them to the homeland to be preserved, but it never happened. Perhaps this German soldier survived the war. That is all for today. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and support the channel by subscribing. Goodbye everyone, until next time.